Hello, I'd like to welcome you here to the Rural Birth Summit, and I'd like to start by welcoming you all here on behalf of the traditional owners, the Gayabul and Jarrah people, and I'd like to also acknowledge all the elders past, present and future, and thank you. Hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Bianca.
Welcome everyone, it's so exciting to be here. It just gives me huge pleasure to have this opportunity. Politically, timing-wise, the stars have aligned for rural women, I think, today. And we have an amazing and unique opportunity to make some real change for our rural communities. So, have we got the next slide? Why are we here? Clearly there's been a massive decline in access to rural birthing over the last 15 to 20 years. As you can see, 48% of our rural maternity units have closed in that time. 130 rural maternity units have closed across Australia in the last 30 years. What we're seeing at the same time, and you'll see later in my speech on rural maternity safety, is that the perinatal mortality in towns where we're not delivering birthing services electively has gone up significantly. So I think it's an obligation for us as a community to provide these services to people as close as possible to where they live. This is one of my favourite slides that I trot out to the media all the time. It's what I call the grey nomad map, and these are the units that have been closed since 1995 in Queensland. It's pretty horrific. Next slide, thanks. So as I said, I think access to birthing services and emergency services locally is an essential service, and I think it's a basic human right. Why are we here today? Democratically, we've seen communities up in outroar over this. We've seen women marching on the streets in Emerald, in Chinchilla. We've seen Facebook groups, we've seen petitions. You know, the women want it, our communities want it, we know it's safe, it's something that we should be doing as a community. Rural Australia is really the engine room of our economy. It's the engine room of our economy. There's so much money and resources coming out of rural Australia. It's our food bowl. We need to support rural Australia, and having appropriate and functional health services is a big part of sustaining the viability of rural communities. This is a map that shows you this is a community impact index, which looks at not just where the units have closed, but the bigger the bubble shows you the impact that it's had on the local community, and that's an index worked out on the number of people that were birthing there and the social impact that it's had on them moving, not being able to birth locally. Childbirth is such an important part of many families' lives. It's a milestone in their lives. It's something that people remember forever, and we need to remember that this is an important issue for people. There's significant cost, social and economic costs for people. There was a lady that commented in the media about a month or two ago up in North Queensland. She was from around the Richmond area. She'd calculated that it cost her family in lost income and in travel expenses and accommodation $28,000 during her antenatal and intrapartum care to uplift her family, get her husband out of work because they're on a property. There are significant financial impacts for our community. And as I said before, you know, viable health services are important. Viable maternity services are often the backbone of procedural services in rural hospitals. So where we lose maternity, we lose operating theatres, we lose other services. So it's bigger than just birthing. This is about the viability of rural communities in general. Next slide, thanks. The other really interesting thing about this space is that it's not for lack of intention. There's been countless reports in Queensland and nationwide that acknowledge what I'm saying today. It's important, it's safe, people want it, we should be doing it. The reason why we're here is it's not happening, and we need to workshop ideas and solutions to make it happen. Next slide, thanks. These are just a list of Queensland Health documents that support the safety and the necessity of rural birthing, and before you saw a lot of national documents that have been produced. Next slide, thanks. The evidence is clear to me, and you'll see in my presentation later around the safety of rural birthing. Ironically, obstetrics and midwifery have been at the bastion of evidence-based medicine in the past. They were leaders in this field in taking it forward, the whole concept of evidence-based medicine and acting on it. In this space, we haven't seen that come to fruition, unfortunately. I think sometimes dear-held views and passions that people have, bad experiences. We've all had bad medical and obstetric experiences that sit in your heart and you don't want to harm anyone. But I think we need to look at the real evidence, because I think we can inadvertently harm people and communities by being too cautious. Next slide, thanks. Next slide, thanks. So look, just trying to cut it short, because you're going to hear lots of speaking today. But look, my vision for today and Sue's vision for today was to really capitalise on this political goodwill that we have, the realignment of Queensland Health, the community being behind us. I think this is a unique opportunity, a unique time in history. I'd like to think of it as the changing of the tide, really, where we can reinvigorate and re-establish birthing services. This is on the back of an amazing commitment by Lawrence to reopen birthing in Beaudesert by 2014, and it's part of why we are here, because this is a unique moment in history. What we'd like to do today is explore evidence-based models and solutions to get this to happen. We want solution-focused, respectful discussion. We understand there's discordant views in the room, but we all want, I think deep down, we all want what's best for our patients and our communities. And even though sometimes those views will conflict, I think it's important to keep that front of mind, that this is what we're here for, and we're about our communities and we're about our patients. And I guess Bruce Chater's voice rings clear in my mind. One of the things about rural health, and one of his famous quotes, is if you've seen one rural town, you've seen one rural town. And I think one of the important things about today is that solutions for different towns have to be unique. They have to take into account the local services that are available, the local staff and skill mix, and the local needs and the local wants and concerns of the community. So any one model's not going to fix everything for us, but part of the reason why we're doing this in a regional way and why we're focusing on local areas is that we understand this, and I think it's an important principle for the day. If this is successful, we are looking at running similar summits in central and northern Queensland to try and help all our communities in Queensland come up with real solutions so that we can get women birthing back in the bush and avoid these horrendous distances and financial and social pressures that they're currently having to deal with. Next slide. And in the words of Lawrence himself, in the media and Herald Sun 2 weeks ago, he used the term back to the future. I mean, what we're looking at is 30 years ago, when I was born in Emerald, you could do this. 30 years ago, people were safely being born in local communities. And it is a case of how do we get back there? How do we get back to what we were doing? And, I think, the movie title Back to the Future really encapsulates that. So without any more further ado, that's the vision side of things. I would like to introduce Lawrence. You all know the Honourable Member for Darling Downs, Lawrence Springborg, is here. Lawrence himself was born in Inglewood, Queensland, which you can no longer birth in. He's had personal experiences himself, which he shared at Rural Doctors Forums, around his own issues and trials and tribulations of his wife not being able to birth locally in rural Queensland. So I think it's with that background and that passion for rural Australia that he comes to us today. And I think, we strongly support Lawrence's direction in this area, and we thank him from the bottom of our hearts for having the vision and the passion to turn this around, which is a politically difficult area and it's an operationally difficult challenge to take on. So without any further ado, I'd like you to welcome the Honourable Member for Darling Downs, Lawrence Springborg.
Thank you very much, John, and can I just acknowledge you all. Ladies and gentlemen, can I also acknowledge my parliamentary colleague, John Krause, who's here, the member for Bow Desert, and obviously has got a very, very strong and passionate connection to today as well, and has been a very, very firm advocate of reopening obstetrics and procedural services at Bow Desert. Can I acknowledge my good friend and former parliamentary colleague and the chair of the Darling Downs District Health Board, Mike Horan, and I understand that we have other members of the board who are here as well, and I think also members have come in from the South West Hospital Board today and probably others around the place. And obviously there are very many distinguished people here today, people who are very, very passionate about this and very keen to make a significant difference with regards to rural birthing and options for rural women into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, being Health Minister in Queensland brings with it a whole range of challenges, but it also brings with it a whole range of remarkable opportunities, and we have absolutely brilliant people generally working in the field of health, providing outstanding quality patient care. But that's not to say that we actually can't do things better in some areas, and certainly we do have some system issues and we certainly have some policy issues which we do need to concentrate on to, I think, provide even better options for patients in Queensland. And having said that, also there are a range of commentaries and a range of challenges, and I just want to set a bit of a scene of some of the things that we are dealing with at the moment in Queensland. And for those of you who are somewhat mesmerised for all the discussion that's going on at the moment around where we're heading in healthcare Queensland and publicly and nationally, I think we're all aware of national health reform, which was signed up to by the previous government in Queensland and the Commonwealth government in 2007, and that actually envisages a whole new regime for the way that healthcare is going to run in Queensland, and also around Australia in the way that it's going to be funding as we largely go towards an activity-based funding model. And that in itself is going to drive significant change and significant reform along the way. In Queensland this year, we increased the health budget by just over $800 million, or 7.4%. That was the largest increase of any state or territory in Australia, and larger than the Commonwealth, which increased by 0.2%. But having said that, we know that things are tough, and we know that the levels of previous health expenditure were unsustainable, and what we've got to do is to go through a situation now of significant realignment and the way that we actually deliver healthcare, not only in Queensland but around the country, in a lean thinking model which actually looks at the priorities about what we want to deliver. Basically what's essential, what's necessary, what would be desirable, what would be nice. And the last two categories are things that would be good to have if we lived in halcyon times, but we don't necessarily live in halcyon times. We have come to government in Queensland with a very, very clear mandate for change in health, and I think there's no doubt about that. And as a part of that, Queensland has wanted to see a leaner central administration in health, and that certainly is the case. Queenslanders wanted to see more options for local management, and we're delivering that with regards to our local hospital boards, and we're going through a process of significant realignment and revitalisation of frontline services. And I understand that for many people there will be some discomfort around some of those changes. But the opportunity for us in the area of revitalisation of frontline services is very, very poignant, particularly when it comes to delivery of rural and remote healthcare in Queensland. This is something which I am very, very passionately interested in, and something which I'm very, very passionately involved in, because I come from a small rural community myself. And indeed, as it was mentioned a moment ago, I was born in the Inglewood Hospital. Our first two children were born in the Inglewood Hospital. The last two were actually born in the Warwick Hospital. And my wife, being typical of many rural women who are extremely resilient and wanting their birthing options, I remember when we couldn't birth the last two in Inglewood, she basically said, well, I'll wait until it's too late and then I'll have to birth locally. And the doctor said, I don't think that's a very good idea, Mrs. Springborg. So we actually did end up going to Warwick. And the second one was who was born in Warwick was after a false start. You know, contraction started, off we go, stopped. Go home for another 3 days. I'm at work in Warwick. My wife rings up and said, I think this is the real McCoy. So I drive an hour and a half home to pick her up, rode around to Warwick, the baby's born, 6 o'clock next morning, after the baby being born at 11 o'clock at night, I loaded her in the car and took her back to Inglewood for the postnatal care. And, you know, that's the reality. And I think we've got to understand that when we're dealing with rural and regional birthing services, the expectations and the paradigm by which we actually see things are somewhat different. And we've had too much of a one-size-fits-all model, which has actually been imposed not only on birthing services, but the delivery of clinical services across Queensland. I think there is no argument from anyone, regardless of whether you are a midwife, a nurse, a doctor, an allied healthcare practitioner in a rural area or a large metropolitan area, you actually have the same view of safe options for patients, because patient care is the most important thing to you, but you actually understand different practicalities. And I don't think that that's something which is really understood well enough, is the practicality of the way that something that can be delivered clinically and safely has to be changed, has to be understood and has to be changed. And that's the most important thing for me. And that's one of the reasons why only recently I had the opportunity and was pleased to invite Dr. Bruce Chater, who everyone would know, if not personally, but by reputation and potentially legend, to actually chair my rural and remote clinical network. Now, as a part of that clinical network, he has invited a whole range of people who actually have real skills and interests in clinical care for rural and regional people to be a part of that network. And I've actually said to Bruce that what I want him to do and his network is to actually look at how we can use their skills, their experience, their connection with rural and remote communities to actually put in place alternative models for the safe delivery of services in rural and remote areas around Queensland. And that's, of course, under a banner of safety, which people like Bruce and other people in this room have actually been doing in diminishing numbers for years and years and years now. And it's that practical, common sense, realistic touch which we actually have to bring to the way that we do this. So it's about a mantle of safety, but it's appropriate models of care which are clinically and safely provided in the various rural and remote areas and regional areas around Queensland. And I'm very, very pleased to have Bruce on board, and I understand now why you should put off as long as you possibly can giving Bruce your personal email address. Because you're likely to get emails at 3 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock and all hours of the day. And that is his passion. And it's not only in rural birthing, but also there are other areas as well, in renal. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous how we have people that basically live out the rest of their life in a cheap motel in Cairns because we can't provide them with renal options in their local community somewhere across the Cape. And there are ways that we're actually now looking at actually providing those particular options safely delivered in their local community. But I'll have some more to say about that in other forums. Can I just go through some of our initiatives? Our Mums and Bubs policy will be up and going on the 1st of January next year, which will make available to all women across Queensland who have birthed a home visit at 2 and 4 weeks of age. Now, of course, in rural and far-flung remote areas, there may be some challenges and we might have to use the likes of technology and Skype and those sorts of things to do it, but we'll certainly will be doing those things. That's very, very important, and that starts from the 1st of January next year. And then, of course, encouragement for women to actually attend for their postnatal checkup and support at 2, 4, 6 or 8 months and 12 months as well. We understand that currently there are options for women with regards to home visits and also visits to maternal and community health. We understand that this aims to actually build on that and actually to expand those particular models as we go forward. And that's what we'll be encouraging mums to do. With regards to our patient travel subsidy scheme, we've seen significant improvements in that. From the 1st of January, the amount of money made available for a kilometre will increase from 15 to 30 cents a kilometre, and the amount of money which will be available for overnight accommodation for the patient and an approved carer will increase from $30 to $60, the first time that's increased since 1987. In actual fact, it's stayed the same way since 1987, and that is also going to help to break down some of the tyranny of distance issues, but hopefully we'll have less people having to use that option, because through telehealth telehealth, and also the fact that we want to reinvigorate some of these services. We'll have more options available more closely, but we do understand people will have to travel. And the flying obstetrician and gynaecologist, we're actually just working through now the finer details around the implementation of that, and the increase of its hours from 400 to 1,000 hours, sequentially from 600 to 800 and beyond, and we're going through that finer detail, and hopefully we'll be able to land the implementation of that sometime early next year. As was mentioned earlier on by John, I made a commitment at the Rural Doctors Association conference on the Gold Coast in June that we will be increasing our, that we will be reopening Beaudesert as a place for obstetric and procedural services from the 1st of July 2014. I know that probably created a bit of a shockwave around the department and elsewhere, but frankly, unless you're prepared to put a line in the sand and say we're going to do this, it doesn't happen, because people will always find an excuse as to how they're not ready and, you know, all these sorts of things. Okay, that's where it is, and that's when it's going to start. Just the same as we did recently with the Metropolitan Emergency Department Access Initiative, which aimed to ban ambulance bypass and redesign the way our emergency departments operated. And I'd like to thank the unions involved and the clinicians involved under the auspices of Dr. David Rosengren for the work that was done in that area. And I adopted that on day one when it was handed to me, and we're seeing some remarkable change, and we're seeing some remarkable results in that area already, both in ambulance ramping and also bypass. And it goes to show what happens if you actually seize the agenda on these things. I mean, the Hearst review was actually put up on the screen there before. That in itself is a great blueprint for reinvigorating rural birthing services across Queensland. But it was a great document that's gathering inches and inches of dust. And that's the real problem. There's no point in actually inviting people with that skill and qualification and commitment and groups of other people to actually come forward if you're not prepared to actually pick it up and to do something with it. And that's going to be my view. If we've got good stuff coming forward, don't hesitate. He who hesitates is lost, because we've got some things that we need to do. And frankly, it frustrates people if they're a part of a consultation agenda. If you're using their skills, you've asked them to do something, it's generally good work, and you actually just sit it around and you leave it collecting dust. We need more commitment to our midwifery-led models of care. I am very, very supportive of that model, and it's something which I have written to our hospital and health boards and actually have encouraged them to commit to as well. It's something which the government's committed to. It is our policy, and I would be very unhappy if we find that there is any intransigence towards the importance of that particular model and how we can actually replicate and to get uptake of that. I know that there's discussions about, you know, whether it's 10% this, how we can go about enforcement with regards to the continuity around it. Can I say I'm reluctant to put more KPIs on our hospital boards, because we've already put about 50 of them, and once you actually have a whole range of things, you actually get lost in the mire of what your obligations are. It's a bit like what we're currently going through at the moment with our lobbyist register in the body politic. I mean, what you need is a commitment, a philosophical and an ideological commitment to that which is important, and to actually enforce that when I'm actually speaking with and actually engaging with our hospital and health services. Private practicing midwives, and we're at the heart of where it started in Australia, here in Toowoomba, and I pay full credit to everyone involved. It's been absolutely fantastically delivered, and I cannot believe reticence to the population and the translation of it to other hospitals, not only around Queensland, but also around Australia. And I speak with pride about the work which has been done here in Toowoomba and the success of that model. And we've gone a little bit further than taking our infant steps around Queensland, with another couple of hospitals coming on board around the state and others actually looking at it. And we have to move to make sure that we can break down those particular barriers as well. Because it can work and it does work. And I'm not interested in petty jealousies. I'm not interested in people who just believe that it's some sort of attack on super specialisation or vice versa. I mean, we're all a part of what is the continuum of healthcare. women deserve choices, they deserve access to the best possible options. We know people who actually specialise in our major tertiary and regional hospitals in obstetrics and the super specialisation have got a very, very important role to play. There is no doubt about the level of care that they actually provide. You know, it's not about one side being better than the other. It's not about indeterminate silos. This is about collaboration. It is about working together. It's about understanding and respecting what women want, and it's about making sure that they feel comfortable with the whole experience all the way through. And that's why I am very, very passionate about it, and I'm not interested in professional pitch battles around this, and that's my encouragement, is that we need to get on board with this, and I suppose it's about making people aware of the positivity of it, but it is here to stay, and as far as I'm concerned, it is going to be expanded across Queensland, and that's my commitment with regards to that. We have a range of other challenges, professional indemnity insurance as well for midwives that are providing home births. I discussed this the other day at the Standing Council on Health in Perth. I've been very concerned that whilst there is this desire generally to do something about it with all of our state, territory and Commonwealth health ministers, we seem to be stuck at the moment because it's very, very controversial. You know, people don't want to deal with it. They know it's an issue out there. The reality is it's not going to go away. It's how we deal with it. And it is on the agenda for our next ministerial council meeting, which will be in Adelaide in April, and hopefully we'll be able to land something, because if we don't make a decision soon, it will be the end of next year, it'll be the year after or thereabouts, and we want to have a situation, people like myself and other ministers, where we understand women are going to exercise certain things. We'd prefer that they wouldn't, but the reality is some will. And we have to make sure that they feel comfortable, and if we've at least got them engaged to that level, if we can identify risk, we can actually encourage them to actually then maybe even transition into our hospital system. And so we've got to actually do that, and basically an alienation process doesn't fix what is a problem out there. We've got issues such as birthing on country, which we're going to have to continue to work towards as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we are working hard against an ideological background of the re-establishment of rural birthing and procedural services across Queensland. Beaudesert will be the template, but I don't think we should necessarily just wait for Beaudesert. If we can do it in other areas before Beaudesert, let's just do it. But I'm just quite amazed at how, we've almost had this completely bleeding away of confidence that this can be done as a part of our clinical workforce in Queensland. And indeed, when I made that announcement this year at the Rural Doctors Conference, I had an emergency department doctor who would be used to sewing back on limbs and triaging people and resuscitating people, being completely psyched out by the notion of doing a postnatal check on a baby or a mother. And I'm thinking, and Dr. Cleary was there, and he was a part of this discussion. He basically said, take the pulse, do this, do that, do something else. But isn't it quite remarkable? Someone who can actually, who was competent and capable of doing all of these remarkable things and saving lives was psyched out by that. And I mean, the whole notion of a rural generalist, I mean, when I grew up, a rural generalist is what you had. Your GP was able to do obstetrics, anaesthetics, paediatrics and orthopaedics. Today, if we can give them one on top of being a GP, we think we're quite remarkable. It's like Groundhog Day, it really is. I mean, it's back to the future. So now we're making, trying to make this sort of, remarkable achievement out of what we grew up with. And I mean, the generalist model is something that doesn't only have applicability to rural areas, it has applicability to, I think, some of our dilemmas of healthcare in our bigger centres as well, a la what they're doing in Singapore at the moment. And I think that we're actually seeing that. We've got nurses who are actually increasing their skills and specialities and doing a whole range of remarkable things as well. And we need to recognise and reward that. And again, we've got to do the same with regards to our medical workforce. And to me, I just find it strange how things that we took for granted are no longer taken for granted or even properly recognised. So we know that we've got challenges with regards to retention of the current birthing model at Chinchilla. We want to be able to re-establish full services that existed at Emerald. Our hospital and health board, in my discussions with them, are very keen to reopen Cooktown, and I've encouraged them to actually look at how we can reopen Weipa as well, and there's a range of models that we can put in place around that. And again, I think our rural and remote clinical network is going to be key to this, because if you look at the number of hands on deck that we need to have to actually be able to do this vis-a-vis what used to be able to safely deliver it years ago, I think there's something gone a little bit of awry in the middle. So we've got to make sure we get that right. For me, will we be able to reopen all of the areas that used to birth? No. I mean, I'd love to think in an ideal world that we could have birthing again in Inglewood and Texas, but we can't, because there's not enough, and we know that. But there's a lot of places that used to birth that we can. And there is a critical mass, and there's a critical capability that actually exists locally to be able to do that. And so if we get the whole continuum right, from professional skills, policy, commitment, move away from centralisation to decentralisation to confidence in locals through their local hospital boards to be able to deliver that. I think, ladies and gentlemen, this is something that we can actually do, because frankly women and their families in rural and regional areas deserve better than what they've been given over a long period of time. I think it's not only fundamentally unfair on them that they've had to travel so far, be confined for so long, waiting their birth experience that can be up to 6 weeks depending upon how remote they are, even for a relatively low risk birth. And that's also unfair on women and our staff in the bigger hospitals as well, because they put pressure on down there when they could be safely birthed locally. So we have spare capability, the capacity and the will and the energy in rural and regional areas to be able to deliver babies locally. We've got beds to spare in many of these hospitals, and yet we have our larger regional metropolitan hospitals which have been subject to what has been the trickle down of the domino effect of the centralisation and the super regionalisation of services, not only in birthing but also procedural areas as well. And I'm very much determined to actually break that paradigm, and that's why I've made the commitments that I have actually made. But this has to be about collaboration. It's not about task substitution. It's not about someone being better than anyone else. It's about recognising that there's this extraordinary commitment and capability to give women their birthing options more closely to home, and everyone working together can actually deliver it. Ladies and gentlemen, can I wish you all the very best for your Rural Birthing Summit. I'm very, very keen on the energy that's around the room, and I look forward to having your feedback and your ideas reported to me as we can actually work together to achieve what we commonly believe in. Thank you.